Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon. Today's topic, every cloud has a silver lining. Well, I said, how we set up a cloud data platform at Essex County Council. So I'm Adam Thomas, and I'm a data and analytics manager at Essex County Council. We've got 45 minutes together today where I want to talk to you about cloud data platforms, and specifically how we've set ours up in case you're interested in doing the same. So my intention is to spend 30 minutes discussing why we wanted to investigate a cloud data platform, what our platform looks like and how we did it. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. Dave is our other facilitator today, and he'll collect your questions for a Q&A in the final 15 minutes we have together. My aim today is to leave you with 7 lessons we learned from setting up our cloud data platform to help you if you're interested in the same technology. So your first question is going to be might be about why we started looking into a cloud data platform. And a couple of years back at Essex County Council, we were interested in how we could make better use of data, business intelligence and analytics. Out of that desire to know how we could do that better, we created our first data strategy. And our strategy focused on 3 things. So it set a vision for how we wanted to use data in the future. It built some understanding of our current maturity, how we believed we were as an organisation across 5 key domains. And it identified initiatives that we wanted to pursue to help close the gaps in that maturity between our vision and where we were today. So when I talk about understanding our current data maturity, we set up a self-assessment process with a number of questions covering off these 5 topics. So each of the questions under these topics had a sliding scale for a response, with 1 highlighting a naivety to that topic and 5 demonstrating some expertise. When we reviewed the results, we found our lowest scoring section was related to data management. But it wasn't just the scoring that showed us where our weaknesses were. Some of the comments that went alongside the questions helped to illuminate why the scores were how they were. Some of the people were highlighting that they couldn't get information easily, and instead of having a nice suite of reports available in a couple of clicks, information was scattered around and wasn't easy to access. And sometimes the reporting required further digging as the consistency of definitions wasn't as robust as it could have been. So therefore we ended up with sort of different versions of the truth. All of that culminated, so with the weaknesses highlighted, we looked into some more details to find out why our data management was particularly low. And we found out that we had 2 flavors of reports. Our first flavor was manual reporting. So someone would ask a business question to a data analyst, and a data analyst would have to ask around to find out where that information existed. If it was in a system, they had to ask a system developer to extract the raw data into a single spreadsheet. And if it was a manual tracker, they had to find out where that manual tracker was and how to get access to it. They'd then do their analysis. They might create some pivot tables or some filters and graphs in Excel and copy those graphs into make some graphs and copy them into a PowerPoint. They present these findings within their PowerPoint to their stakeholders, and these people would regularly ask a question that wouldn't be asked by that exact data file. That usually meant having to take the question away, ask for a different cut of data, wait for that to be provided, then redo the analysis, redo the graphs and redo the PowerPoints, which could add an inordinate amount of time onto the whole process. It's not a very quick process, and particularly as the amount of information collected by organisations is growing, our expectations were starting to change. If that was the first flavour of reporting we had, the second was semi-automated reporting. So some areas of the council were starting to use Power BI to create self-service reports, but these reports had to be created on a very specific version of Power BI so it could be hosted by our on-premise platform. That was useful because functions were starting to build self-service dashboards rather than that Excel pivot table PowerPoint cycle we've just covered. But we didn't take an organisation-wide viewpoint as to how this could be set up and run. Each team was given Power BI and told, off you go. It was a new tool and it was sort of treated like Excel, where every team could use it however they wanted. This was good because we were starting to make data more accessible, but we were finding other downsides with this semi-automated process. The first one was there was a question about to publish or not to publish. Some teams chose to publish data onto our central server, making it accessible, whereas others chose to store their reports locally, which still meant we still had the problem of data being held in silos and only accessible to some, not a wider part of our organisation. The second problem we had was we had multiple versions of the truth. As each team was given their own areas within our server. We didn't do great communication about who was publishing what. So we had multiple areas for each team publishing reports. We had different versions of the truth floating around where different teams would publish overlapping reports, but they might be using different filters, and it didn't make it clear what was being measured, overall making the data more confusing rather than making it useful. We also found out we had some legacy debt in our reporting databases. So our databases were building up over time. And different teams had their own areas and different requirements. So when we reviewed what was in our databases, we saw tables called like version 2 or version 3, making it confusing as to what was the correct version to build your report on top of. And our final issue in this semi-automated world was our processing time. Our on-premise servers were starting to creak. Our jobs were old and our servers were rickety. And on average, it was taking hours and hours and hours to complete the list of SSIS jobs, which meant that our data wasn't ready for the start of the business day, which can cause quite some headaches in terms of trying to make sure we're reporting the correct information as up to date as it needs to be. In 2022, we then had a major issue where our on-premise servers crashed. So our daily jobs to populate our databases stopped working and our Power BI reporting server became unavailable. All of our operational reporting could continue, but all of our performance measures, business intelligence and management information went blind. Our disaster recovery processes kicked in, but we realized that our infrastructure needed updating, and companies like Microsoft, Amazon, or Google's cloud services were likely to have better availability or uptime compared to the servers we were managing locally. It was at this point that we decided it was time for an upgrade to make sure our data platform was suitable for the 21st century. Which might lead you to your next question, which is, Adam, when you talk about a data platform, what do you mean? And for me, a data platform does the 4 things we've got on screen. So the key things are it's able to move data from where it is collected into a reporting database, i.e. it's able to ingest or perform those ETL jobs to move that data around. It then stores all the information from across the organization in a central location. And where that data is stored, you're able to connect a wide variety of tools to it to perform different analysis. The final stage is for that regular reporting, it needs that visualization layer sitting on top. So therefore, it's not just a big group of tables. It is a case of we are making data interpretable across the whole organization. Our old ways of working had people working from data files stored in personal areas. And our one key aim for our data platform was to bring in data from lots of different places and store it in one single central hub. So it was available to anyone who wanted to analyze it. And it was set up in a way that everyone came to the same answer when performing that analysis. So a lot of our focus when setting up our cloud data platform went into those first 2 boxes around ingestion and storage. How could we pick up data stored in a variety of formats and store it in a location that lots of people could log in and access? So that's the high-level design concept. They're the 4 services our data platform needs to be able to provide. The next stage of the high-level design gets a lot more complicated, because each of those providers we mentioned earlier on, be it a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon, have hundreds of services that can support your needs across both those 4 areas, plus loads of wider things as well. On the screen right now, what I've put up is some of the examples from Microsoft's offering. And as you can see, it can look a bit overwhelming because you're sitting there at a first stage of going, right, which one do I pick? There are like at least 3 tools for ingestion. We have three tools made immediately available to us. But how do you know which ones are right for you? With that in mind, we knew that solution architecture was key. And we've got 3 options regarding that. So either we could buy a complete data platform that someone had set up and handed over to us at the end of their design and build journey. We could build it all ourselves and learn as we go, or we could partner with an organization where they can use their expertise to put together the design and help with the initial setup. And then we build the platform ourselves so that we know how it works. So I said at the start, I'd like to pass on 7 key lessons. And the first of that for me is make sure to invest in solution architecture, be that invest with either knowledge in your own organization or like we underestimated the amount of solution design that was needed to go in at this stage. For us, we chose to work with a partner in this sense to help us identify which of the 200 cloud services that Microsoft provide would be most suitable to us. So, for example, they helped us to establish at the front what were the actual technical security networking services we needed to make sure that our platform was secure, suitable for holding client level data. They helped us understand which of the ingestion tools were most suitable. For us, it was identified that Synapse Analytics was our ETL of choice, and this was because it had better notebook functionality. So in the future, if we wanted to complete any additional work using like R or Python scripts, we could integrate them into our ETL flows, which tools like Azure Data Factory are more customized to moving data between systems and applications rather than that notebook ability. Our partners also helped us set up that we needed 2 of those services in the storage area. We've decided to set up a data lakehouse. So from that, what we're doing is we're using the Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage as a data lake. What we're doing is we're copy and pasting any information that's as it's collected and storing it in a lake in an unstructured. It's all there as a copy of what's in our system. We're then using the Azure SQL database to do that warehouse part of the structure, where we're taking lots of that unstructured information, working out how we can piece them together and match them to create a warehouse structure. So therefore, we've got data tables available based on domain and subject specific area. So therefore, we've got all of our information in one place with sensible naming conventions, and people know where to go. Because if they want information on, let's say, adult social care assessment data, they can go and find the relevant table with that naming convention to then start their analysis. The second key lesson for me from the cloud is the big advantage of having a cloud data platform is that they tell you can scale up or scale down your services as you require. We looked into the analytics function, and currently we use RStudio as one of our main analytics tools of choice. When we were setting up our design, we know that we might want to go further this in the future, but we know that by looking into something like Azure Machine Learning. But with RStudio being our current setup, we put a lot of focus into ingestion, storage, and visualization, and we're just working on how we could connect our existing RStudio setup to our Azure Data Lakehouse option. But the advantage of the cloud element is when we make that call to start using Azure Machine Learning as a potential option, or one of the other 200 services you've got, it's a case of it can be switched on in a matter of hours. We can set up a subscription, we can turn it on, and we don't have to go through a full procurement process for a new piece of software. It's very much the pay by you drink. I'd like to use this service. We can turn it on. We can start using it within a matter of hours rather than a matter of months if we wanted to go through a procurement option. And then finally, the solution architecture helped us show that Power BI gives you the ability to set up workspaces, refresh reports, and enable sharing of our reports inside our organization, with the key message being that if you have an Enterprise Office 365 subscription, then Microsoft Power BI Pro comes with no additional cost. That was a big tick in our box. So that was all the high level design. What do we want our data platform to look like? And what cloud services do we look to turn on to give us that structure? The next stage in our journey was taking it from high level design to low level design. So for each of those functions, how are we going to make them work within our organization specifically? So we set up 3 environments, a small dev environment to allow people sort of a playground to experiment with, a test environment so that once our sort of reports and data models were ready for testing, they could be made accessible to a limited portion for testing, and a live environment where our data is refreshing daily to give all of our business users the information that they require to make more effective decisions. We found there were technical challenges at every layer. So our data developers or data engineers had to learn more about that data lakehouse structure we discussed, how to load in copies of data and transform and load them into warehouse structures for a variety of different business functions. Our analysts had to learn how new functionality in the updated cloud version of Power BI worked. we brought in this area of Power BI data models that you see on their screen, which was new functionality to us. So what we were doing with that is using those data tables from the warehouse and connecting them in a way that analysts didn't have to guess how tables connected. All the relationships were pre-built. All of our performance measures get pre-built into the data, into those data models, in a way that any analyst performing their analysis can then drag and drop the performance measures in, and they know they always get the agreed correct definition and don't have to worry about calculating it from scratch each time. So we then went and published those data models and those reports that we built connected to those data models to provide that sort of functionality. So lakehouse structure, ingesting data in using Synapse, then building on the data model. So therefore our warehouse is all connected and our analysts know exactly what relationships and measures they can use for their reporting. Building the regular performance reports that make it accessible to the wider organization. And then finally, how would we distribute those around the wider organization? Because we looked into using Microsoft, we looked into using Power BI apps. So we don't grant access into specific workspaces. What we do is we publish each of the dashboards into a Power BI app where we've got all of the user control. We've set up access control groups with automated rules. So therefore, anyone in adult social care commissioning, let's say, is added into that group via automated rules. Therefore, when they join and they've got the relevant permissions, they can then access all of the reports that are relevant to their job title. So I covered off lessons 1 and 2. Key lesson 3 for me is don't think of setting up a cloud platform as lift and shift. This was a mistake we made in our early days. The original thought was we'll update the location of the data tables, we'll take a copy of the old dashboards and just change the connection details to the new data tables. Do not make this assumption, and for a few reasons. So one, using dashboarding on the cloud has different setups. So the cloud version for us had different functionality to our on-premise version of Power BI. So for example, we now using the data models or semantic models as Microsoft call them, and Power BI apps, which are new functionality that we didn't have, which meant that a lot of our dashboards are actually rebuilding because they weren't even connecting to data tables. They were connecting to pre-built measures. They were connecting to the pre-built reports. Second reason for not making this assumption is that the underlying data is likely to change during a migration. In recoding our data tables within our warehouse, we uncovered old bugs, glitches, nuances, and places where data had been duplicated, which we then had the opportunity to strip out. Because these data tables got a bit of a tidy up, this had a knock-on effect to some of our reports and visuals. So some numbers looked different or needed recoding, which led to more time and effort that was originally expected in our project plan. Fourth key lesson from this is about centralization. So I mentioned earlier on that our databases are one central hub where we're trying to store all of our reporting information for the organization. We put a lot of effort into creating these central data models. And one of the things highlighted in the data strategy was how reports could use different definitions. So to try to limit that, we've got those data definitions coded and put under a governance process where we've got an Azure change board. There's a central group of people responsible for those data models that come together, review any changes to make sure that they're not treading on each other's toes. This way, it took more time to build up front, but it aims to keep your reporting as consistent as possible, no matter which team or analyst is building that report. We've talked so far a lot about technical setup, solution design, solution architecture, what services you might want to consider turning on. But there is one key element that we might want to consider that is a non-technical thing that anyone could start at today, and that is the ability to review your data. And this is key lesson number 5. At some point during this process, you'll need to catalog your data. Microsoft, Google, and Amazon all have tools that help you to maintain this catalog of data, but it still requires that manual work to collate it, understand it, and define it at the start point. Once your environments are created, once your resources are deployed, once your security, networking, and permissions are in place, the next question is always going to be, so what data are we going to put into that data platform? And the easiest way to know what can be added and what can be left behind is to audit your data. It's not a pretty job, but it is a necessary job that I'd fully recommend people to start doing that. Auditing your data sounds easy, but where do you start for this? our recommendation is to start by working backwards. Start by understanding what are the reports you've got today and work from there. So we started by reviewing what reports were on our on-premise solution, on our on-premise server. We found that we had 195 reports, a combination between what was on our on-premise server and some of those locally held but business critical reporting. 195 is what we started with, that were being created across 7 different insight teams. So from that, we took those 195 reports and we looked at them across 2 areas. One was, are any of those 195 not being used today? We set a time limit and worked out using some usage statistics about, are any of them not being used? If so, why should we put the time, effort and energy into moving them across onto our cloud platform? And the second thing we did in reviewing those 195 was, what data were they connecting to? Could we find that they were coming from data that wasn't refreshing, or old, outdated information, or they were presenting performance measures that differed with those predefined ones that we'd built into our data models? So what we found from that is 100 of our tools were either not being used or were connecting to inefficient data sources and could be rebuilt into other reports. So therefore, we ended up with 95 reports that we needed to migrate onto our cloud data platform. Once we got down to those 95, we were looking into what data populates those 95 dashboards. We found there were hundreds of tables across our estate that were being used to calculate the measures and build the visuals in those reports. So what we identified is that those 700 data tables were the ones we were going to set up within our Azure data cloud platform. We also identified from that they were coming from different sources. So some were coming from system sources, others were coming from spreadsheets, others were coming from external data sources like APIs or XMLs. So we built 16 different data connectors to make it easier in the future to help. Okay, if we find a new data source and we go, oh right, that's an XML file, we've already got the sort of mechanisms to attach to that, ingest it and bring it in. Same thing for CSVs and Excel files. So no matter what the data type, we could bring it in, populate it so that all of the information is available as tables in that central location. Although that sounds like a lot of data, my key lesson number 6 is you don't have to move all of it. So we only moved the elements that were relevant for our reporting across those 6 key business functions, which led to about 1/10 of the total data we collect across those functions. So we didn't move all of it, we just moved what we needed for our reporting purposes with the knowledge that we can expand it later on. We can add things in and we can expand to other functions as we grow. So we've covered off what our cloud data platform looks like. We covered off what we're looking to put into our cloud data platform and why we did it. So the final bit is about how we did it. So I mentioned that we had 100 reports we were looking to migrate across 6 different insight teams. We had a technical and a project sponsor, and we had a project manager, but we took a decision to coordinate the delivery with all 7 of those insight teams. So each team was responsible for producing their new reports on our platform. That way, each of those 7 teams knew how each report worked on the new environment, and they built up some experience publishing those reports. However, they had to balance these cloud migration requests against their BAU activity. We originally got agreement that this would work as a practice, that we could balance BAU and we could slow down some work as required to focus on our cloud migration. But trying to balance BAU with cloud migration did not work. So my key lesson number 7 is, do not balance this with BAU like we did. Set up a specific project team. Despite the fact we had a project manager, a sponsor, an enterprise architect overseeing it, we didn't have sort of nominated resources to work on the migration. So we had a team of 2 halves, one focusing on how we'd ingest that data and store it as data tables, and half of the teams focusing on moving their reporting. But our deadlines slipped because our BAU work needed to be prioritized, taking resources away from our migration. And we ended up delivering this work about 3 months later than we originally intended. So if that's how we did it, some takeaway points from that. Your next question might be, what benefit does it bring to the organization? So After we delivered our cloud platform, we worked with the different insight teams and stakeholders using the reporting to find out some of the information and feedback, which is some of what you see on screen at the moment. But overall, we categorized our benefits into 4 areas. So the first is we've got improvement to the employee experience. I called out at the start how our reports are all scattered around now, but everyone in our organization can go to powerbi.com and they can see what reports are available to them for their relevant sort of role, job, and function. So we've now got that single portal for all of our reporting needs that's controlled by access groups, so people can only see what is suitable for their role. The second benefit we've got is our data skills and our capability growth. We now feel like our insight teams have built a better knowledge of some market leading technologies. So in our mind, that helps with our retention of our staff because they're learning those sort of market leading things. It helps with recruitment because we can identify people with those wider skill sets, and hopefully it helps with our onboarding of any future data professionals because it's using tooling that is industry standard and that people from other organizations would be used to as well. The third benefit is about the speed of our insights. So one of the key benefits of the cloud platform is speed. So we mentioned how our data and reports wouldn't update before the start of the business day, and now they will update in 1/8 of the time that they used to. So we can start asking questions of our platform if we want to, if we find the relevant use case to actually update our reports more than once a day. If we want to start pushing towards closer to real time, that becomes much more of a possibility. And then finally, you've got the general cloud benefits of scalability, flexibility, reliability, and cost. Those cloud data platforms have got more people dedicated to maintaining the platform than we could provide as a county council. So that provides our sort of trust and robustness in the system to make sure it is there and it is working when we need it to be working. Within the ability to turn on those extra services. So if we decide we want to start branching out and do more, start exploring potentially more into that AI space, it's easier to turn them on and we can use them as we see fit. So the next question for us is, where do we go next? We've set up a cloud data platform, but we are aware this is a constantly evolving journey. We're not sitting back at the end of 2023 and going, yes, we've done this now. We can put our feet up and enjoy and reap the rewards. We know it's always going to be a continual thing we've got to work on. So in 2023, we set up our cloud data platform, and one of our pathways within 2024 is to consistently keep building up our data library with more data. We know that our data platform doesn't have all of the information available across all of our organization for all of our reporting needs. So as we keep finding new reports, how do we keep adding to it and turning our cloud data platform into our central hub where all of our data professionals, if they've got a question going, right, okay, we need to know this as a business question, they know that is the first place to turn to because it is our central hub of data. The second pathway we're taking in 2024 is to continue to improve our governance and processes regarding new tools. So we've set up things like an Azure change board, like I mentioned, bringing those key team members together. We've set up new roles and responsibilities within 2023, but they're very much focused on those 95 reports covering those 6 business functions we discussed earlier on. We're looking to widen this out. How do we make the data governance more important across the whole organization, and we take it from being an Azure change board focusing on individual changes to data models to ensuring that the organization owns their data and we can keep benefiting from these platforms. And the final pathway is to explore more of the 200 Azure services. We've had sessions earlier in the week regarding AI. For us, we're using Azure. Google and Amazon have the same kinds of services, but if we want to branch out into turning on more of those services to help us uncover more insight and intelligence from the vast amounts of data we've got, we want to explore which of those services we might want to turn on next and how that can benefit the council in doing more and uncovering more insight. So in summary, they're my 7 key takeaways. If I was to go through this again, these are the 7 key messages that I would pass on to you today. So one is solution architecture starts complicated, so make sure to put a lot of effort into it when you begin. The second area we've got is work in phases. One of the benefits of cloud is that you can turn services on and off as you need it. So don't feel like you've got to go big bang and do everything in one go. Start small with something and look to grow it as you need. Remember, it's not lift and shift. There are new functionality in some of these cloud tools that even if you've got some of these sort of software technologies in your estate, they might not directly match up with how you're using it today. So don't make that assumption that it's simply copy and paste into a cloud environment. 4, keep trying to push towards centralizing your data models. If you've got a central hub that holds all your data, it makes governance easier because you can all oversee it from one place. Recording our data definitions in a single place has made life so much easier because we're not now dealing with that multiple versions of the truth by rebuilding them into our models. 5, cataloging your reporting. It's not a sexy job, but it's one that needs doing to understand what data you hold and how it connects to your reports and what calculations are performed in your data tables to get you from source to report. 6 is that you don't have to move everything. We didn't. We only moved what we needed to for those initial reports, and then we can grow as we need to. And 7 is allowing people the space to focus. We didn't set up a multidisciplinary team for delivery, and that affected our ability to deliver on time. So don't expect your teams to be able to balance cloud migration and their BAU tasks. Thank you for listening to my discussion on setting up a cloud data platform today. Hopefully you've been dropping some conversations into the chat, and this is where I now hand it over to you. Have you got any questions you'd like to raise?
Hello, everybody. I've been going through the questions as we've been going along, so I will draw some attention. We've had lots of questions, Adam, while you've been busy presenting. So the first one we're going to go with is, in smaller organisations, IT holds the key to a lot of stuff. Whilst this is incredible, how do you get IT on board, both in terms of investment and additional services required to be able to be for the thing to be maintained?
Nice, that's a good question. Yep, you're right. In small organisations, IT are often sort of like the gatekeepers to these types of technology. One of the big drivers for us was when we were going through the solution architecture, we did like a cost comparison. So as I mentioned that we partnered and we had a big setup where we reviewed our data, understood how much data we might want to move. And our partners helped us to understand the potential costs of a cloud data platform. Our IT team had already run their sort of costings of their on-premise one and found that the cloud services were a fraction of the cost it was to run our on-premise things, even down to things like power or cooling or elements of that they'd factored into their costing estimates. So when we were sitting there and went, right, this could be a fraction of the cost to run it in that space, our IT teams went, oh, yes, please. The big jumping off point we had for us is something that our IT team called shifting left. What they were like is they were the gatekeepers originally of our old platform. But what we're doing in some new roles and responsibilities is starting to hand that out to some of our data teams rather than our IT teams. So we're sort of going, we can take some of that responsibility off of you, and we can work on managing, testing and deploying our Power BI reports rather than us building them and having to submit them to you for then deployment through the IT team. So we did that by trying to take that and shifting some of that responsibility left from the TS team into our data teams to then say, look, we can cost less money. We can take some of the responsibility of your, like I said, they're fantastic, but often overworked. How can we move some of that work and help distribute that load? And that helps to maintain the confidence and build up that trust and make them want to support this.
Excellent. Right. I'll follow that up actually, because there was another question on a similar line, which was around what challenges did you face in gaining commitment from senior leaders around this sort of technology?
Nice.
And how have you found the cost impact?
Nice. Internal colleagues on using the new technology. So have we had any challenge? Yes. Because change is always different. So what you then got is you've got this fear amongst some people that are saying, we're using new technologies. Are our reports going to change? There was a bit of fear when we announced 100 of these reports either aren't being used or are showing you the wrong information. We're going to decommission them. And we get that sort of fear around that. And that was one part of it. And the other challenges we had around new technology is knowledge and learning curves. We've got to try and balance that and going, right, we want to do this. And there's that overlap between, do we do the training and then go at it, or do we learn as we go? And we took a learn as you go mentality, which people liked and didn't like. It helped ease their concerns because rather than going through a formalized training thing, it was like, right, they got direct access to then try and play or experiment or try and incorporate it from that.
Cool. Right. I will also follow on actually. We've been asked, Erica asked, what was the timeline from identifying the requirements to deploying your new platform?
Nice. So, Erica, thank you for that. I will admit, I know most, but not all of the timelines. So I joined Essex County Council at the start of 2023 when our requirements were sort of being finalised and we were going to our deployment stage. My understanding is that we're doing requirements from sort of like the end point of 2022. We went into delivery phase in 2023, started delivery in January time, and we had the platform live and working for those business functions by end of September, October time. So we originally penciled in 6 months for the build, test, deploy. I think it ends up being more like 10.
Cool. We've also got a question about, is the data in the platform managed by a central data team, or is it devolved to other teams managing it directly? Same
Nice.
as reports. Is reports the same? Nice.
So our way of setting up, I mentioned earlier, we've done that sort of shift left viewpoint. So we've taken some of the responsibility out. And what we've done is we had a team, there were a group of people called data developers, who are a lot of our sort of SQL developers. They're now transitioning more into sort of a data engineering role. And when we mentioned about some of the changes in governance and process for our 2024 roadmap, we're looking as to how we could potentially formalize that into a data engineering function. So what we've essentially got is that data engineering function is overseeing our ingestion and storage. So how we're going to load data, they're overseeing the daily jobs in terms of how we're populating our databases. Each of our reporting areas is being managed by a member of our data team responsible for that business function. So for example, adult social care, we've got an adult social care Power BI workspace, and our adult social care data manager is responsible for the reports in that. So what we've essentially got is a data engineering team that's responsible for populating the databases with requirements. We've got a central data team for each function. So for example, adult social care, children's social care, that is then responsible for the reports in that Power BI workspace.
Cool. We've got another question from Erica actually here around your first point really, which is about investing in a solutions architecture resource. Is a little bit more, what does that involve? You know, what would that look like?
Nice. So this isn't an advert for Microsoft. I talked about Azure because it's the way we chose to go because of our things like Office 365 subscriptions we already had. I believe we engaged with Microsoft at an early day when we knew we wanted to go this way. And Microsoft can provide advice into the services, but they don't necessarily provide that actual like solution architecture themselves. They've got a number of trusted partners, and they put us in touch with one of their trusted partners who we worked with on an initial basis, and they're the ones we work with to do our design, to do our costings, and to do our like initial setup.
Okie dokie. I was going to say we've got loads of questions here, so I will just mention as I'm scrolling down a message from Rob saying that actually Essex Fire have also used centralized Power BI semantic models, and they found that it's reduced a lot of duplication and inconsistencies as well, which is exactly what we found, which is fantastic. It really helps with that clear messaging that goes out. Cool. What have we got? Have you considered how Fabric affects your current approach? And is Fabric on your roadmap?
Nice. This is a lovely question. Have we considered how Fabric affects our current approach to building out an Azure platform? So when we started this last year, Fabric wasn't a thing. We were very much using that Synapse, Azure, Lakehouse, and Power BI, sort of a platform as a service structure. So it was within that Synapse realm, using those services specifically. Fabric, they package them a lot more now, so it's then providing you more of what you'd need for a cloud data platform. So we're now at that conversation about, we've got those services. Like if I went to fabric.whatever is Microsoft.com today, it says these are all the services we package under Fabric, and if you click Power BI, it takes us to our Power BI space. So we already know it's like the way that they're setting it up is a subsection of Fabric. We are starting the debate about how we transition to Fabric. Do we do certain workspaces? Do we do the whole thing? But in terms of our, like when we're discussing about what services we might want to turn in, that becomes part of our thing, rather than do we choose Fabric as a collect-all for all the services we might want, rather than the picking and choosing out of the 200 services that Microsoft provide through Azure.
And then we've got a question from Anthony, who's one of our risk managers here in Essex. Is it possible to create a function level platform in cloud using information in Azure and BI? So I think he's talking about, sort of the wider systems that we've got. As a critical information backup that's separate to the live systems.
Nice. Cool. So I think if I understand you correctly, Anthony, that is essentially what we've done is by setting up a cloud data platform, is that it sits separately from the live system. And every day what it's doing is it's asking for what's been added, updated or changed within those live systems. And it's taking a copy of them and uploading that copy into our data lake. Then we're building the data warehouse off of that data lake to provide it as a separate copy. It's taking a copy of the live system and then we're turning it into our reporting needs in a separate environment. So it is separate. It runs like as a connection, but not directly, like it's not a part of our core system. The reason we're doing it that way is because we know we've got multiple systems within our organization. And what we can start looking is we focused on the core ones for us, for our reporting needs. But in the future, what we could look to do is then bring in things from systems 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you've got things coming in from multiple systems. And our Azure cloud platform is acting as that central hub for going, this came from system 1. This came from system 2. This came from system 3. If we'd like to investigate some data matching techniques to then provide that sort of like, this is a person in those systems and how their records all join together, that's our sort of like future utopia.
We also had a question. I've put some stuff in the chat around the data boards, around the change boards. And the question, if I can find the question again, because I can't see all of the question there. It's basically about the setup and composition, in terms of how often do we meet and who's involved.
So we've set up an Azure change board with the idea being that it reviews any changes requested to new data sorts, new data sets being brought in, new reports being created, and any changes to anything as well. The composition of that in the terms of reference is that it is all of the owners of each of the areas I mentioned earlier on. So for example, it is the owner of our ETL jobs comes in to discuss, to review the changes and how feasible they are. We've got the owner of the adult social care, Power BI workspace, children's, etc. They've also nominated one of their lead sort of people in the area who can come along for them. So we've got one or other of those people, either the nominated developer or the head of that area comes along. Anyone in the organization has the ability, so any data professional in the organization has the ability to raise an Azure change request. We meet on a weekly basis to review them to work out if it's going to tread on other people's toes, if it's going to mess anything up, how it's going to be ingested. And then from that, the key outcomes of that are either prioritizing it to say how quickly do we need to look at it? Is it a business critical thing that our data engineering function need to look at immediately? Is it something slightly less critical that we could look at in a matter of, let's say, weeks rather than days? And we end up with that sort of prioritized list of these are the requests, these are the changes that have been requested, these are the ones that that are being accepted because they don't tread on other people's toes. If they do tread on people's toes, all right, you need to go away and work on that one. And then if they don't, how do we prioritize that work for when it should be delivered and implemented into our platform?
Okay, and I'd made that about time to start wrapping up in terms of what we've done. We'll go through the questions and make sure we've not missed anything, because we can always respond to those afterwards. I know I saw from Erica, she was asking about whether it would be possible to contact you to have more of a discussion, because they're on the way through that journey at the moment. And they want to know things about team structures, how many people. There's all sorts of questions about actually what makes the right amount of data developers, please say more than one. So yeah, there's a few bits and pieces that we can add on, but we're out of time for now. So
lovely. So thank you for joining us today for this session. Thank you for listening to me talk about setting up our cloud data platform. Hope you have a lovely rest of the day.